You can't buy a World Cup. I mean, obviously, with an organization as unimpeachable as FIFA, you certainly can. Where are those air-conditioned stadiums, Qatar, eh? But you can't win football's, and perhaps all of sport's most coveted international trophy, and the associated geopolitical bragging rights, with money, at least not money alone. Even the US crashed out of the tournament with an underwhelming performance against Belgium, despite interference from the Trump administration to postpone Balogun's red card suspension. Now, as we approach the end of the tournament, with the semifinals now set between four previous winners, we are seeing which predictions held more water than others. Before this year's bracket, I saw a very cool model floating around from German economist Joachim Clement. The model has predicted the past three winners correctly, and although, spoiler, this year's pick, the Netherlands, turned out incorrect. Now, to me, Clement seems to both get football, referencing John Oliver's iconoclastic 2014 explanation that football is a religion, and that all of the hoopla is simultaneously a bit ridiculous, for a bunch of men running around kicking a ball. Ironically, his model started as a joke to show how economic models cannot predict sporting events. And yet here we are. Clement says, our model uses these socioeconomic variables to predict the outcome of the World Cup, but it also adds the current FIFA ranking points to indicate the strength of the current squad. Using these variables, I can explain some 55% of the variation in success across nations in a World Cup. With these factors, he computes more than half of the outcome. That still leaves the other half to what Clement calls luck. But as the saying goes, one great player may be fortune. 23 are evidence. Being here in the US, one of the host nations, the perennial, or to be pedantic, quadrennial, question is, why can a country with perhaps the greatest record of producing elite athletes in history, more Olympic medals than any other nation, immense wealth, a large population, and a rich sporting tradition, not field a team capable of more than a respectable second-tier finish? In the past 30 years, the U.S. men's team has reached the World Cup quarterfinals only once, back in 2002. Now, some will say Americans simply cannot understand football, all while ignoring the inconvenient truth that the U.S. women's team has been the most successful nation in the history of the game, 4 World Cups and 5 Olympic gold medals. So the U.S. can do football, or soccer as we like to call it here, but the U.S. is not alone in its conspicuous lack of world football success. China has more people than the U.S. and Europe combined, extraordinary state capacity, and one of the most successful Olympic programs in history. It has never come close to winning a World Cup. India has a 1.4 billion people, and its men's team never qualified. It also underperforms on the Olympic stage for such a large country. I blame cricket. These are 3 of the largest, richest, and most powerful societies on the planet. And in any other field, these advantages would matter enormously. But not so much in football. It seems that you can't brute force success in the beautiful game. The World Cup is not a test of which country has the best athletes. It is a test of which societies have spent decades growing the best systems. They have created a level of depth which international soccer seems to favor over individual outliers, or even the breadth of a nation's athletic prowess. So let's try to measure that. Now, I'm no football expert by any means, but I am pretty comfortable with creating a narrative out of numbers. So I began by pulling data from EA Sports player ratings, the World Bank, and Wikipedia. And an interesting story starts to emerge, one that suggests success on the world stage of football is about growing an ecology, an ecosystem rather than a factory. So what does that mean? When you build a simple model using wealth and population, those 2 variables alone explained about 82% of Olympic medal success. Well, in soccer, that's only 25% of the picture. So, how can we make this assertion? Here's the methodology. Using the EA Sports player rankings, let's classify any player above an overall rating of 80 as elite. The top 2 players right now are Mbappe from France and Haaland from Norway. Checks out so far in my opinion. The 2 most populous countries on Earth, India and China, produce literally 0 players rated above 80 right now. Crazy. The USA fares slightly better with only 340 million people and 4 elite players, but that still isn't even 1 in a million. Compare that to some of the best programs in the world from small countries: Croatia, Portugal, Uruguay, even Spain, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Small countries outproducing countries with hundreds of millions, even billions of people, means that population is just raw material, but a footballing culture is something else. So, going back to the religion comparison, how healthy is the congregation? So if population and GDP cannot simply produce a quality national team, what can it buy? It can buy a league, a cathedral, if you will, to continue the religious parallels. Saudi Arabia perhaps offers the clearest proof. Its domestic league now hosts 37 players that we classified as elite, more than the leagues of France or Portugal, but only 3% of those elite players are Saudi. The money may have changed where some of the world's best footballers work almost overnight, including Cristiano Ronaldo, but it did not change where they learned to play or what kit they wear at the World Cup. And that distinction is not unique to Saudi Arabia. England's Premier League hosts more elite players than any other country in the world, 141 by my count, but 77% of them are imported. The Premier League is the strongest marketplace for football, but that hasn't translated into English success at the international level. Spain's league hosts fewer elite players, but almost half are Spanish. Spain attracts talent and produces it. Germany shows a similar balance. So this gives us two different axes. One measures what money can attract, the other measures what culture produces on its own. Saudi Arabia has plenty of the first and not much of the second. Spain has both. And when the World Cup begins, you can't just pay people to wear your shirt on the pitch, like for the team, right? You get it. Money can move talent, but producing it takes much longer. A powerhouse nation is a system, not any single star player. And the clearest evidence of that system is not the best player a country produces, it's the 23rd. Norway produced Erling Haaland, one of the greatest strikers alive, but one extraordinary player does not give you an extraordinary team. Despite having beaten Brazil and made a run into the quarterfinals against England, their lowest player on the roster is 74, a gap of 16 points from top-rated Haaland. Georgia didn't even make the World Cup, but their highest player is ranked 87, and I will not try to pronounce his name, but many people's favorite to win it all, France. Their best player, Mbappe, is only a little higher at 91. But by the time you reach the edge of France's 23-man pool, you're still choosing among players rated 83, including Eduardo Camavinga, who is a starting midfielder for Real Madrid. Georgia, on the other hand, has already fallen down to a rating of 63. So a star might tell you what's possible, the 23rd player may tell you what's normal. One exceptional player can emerge from a fortunate combination of genetics, family, opportunity, and determination. Producing international-level alternatives at every position requires millions of children, thousands of coaches, hundreds of clubs, local rivalries, academy pathways, and decades of accumulated knowledge. Depth is just the tangible output of this invisible cultural commons. These rankings only show us the finished product, but when one society produces a single great player and another produces 23, we're not looking at individual fortune, we're looking at an ecosystem. But that system does not have to draw from one fixed or homogeneous national population. Almost a quarter of France's elite player carries some observable connection to a country outside Europe through a birthplace or an additional citizenship. And that's probably an underestimate. The real figure is obviously a bit higher. The roots are not random. They follow histories shaped by empire, language, labor, and migration. Algeria, Senegal, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, and other countries connected to France through its colonial past. But these players were not simply imported as finished footballers. Many were born in France, raised in French cities, and trained in French clubs. France did not become great simply by importing African players, an argument that is often bookended by, I don't want to sound racist, but... because many of those players were born, raised, and developed in France. They are French. The variable is not ethnicity. It is the system that produces players. Different inputs, the same outcomes. An ecology capable of turning potential into top players. And those players increasingly work inside the same concentrated global economy. 82% of the world's 500 highest-rated players are employed in just 5 European leagues: England, Spain, Italy, Germany, and France. the World Cup presents itself as a contest between nations. But most of the year, the players representing those nations are workers inside of one transnational industry. Which brings us back to the United States, China, and India. India demonstrates that population is not a player pool. Cricket commands the attention, aspiration, money, and informal play that football receives in much of the rest of the world. China demonstrates that infrastructure alone is not a replacement. A government can build pitches, they can fund academies, and announce national ambitions. You can build the factory, but you cannot get millions of children to love the game. And the United States demonstrates that sporting power is not necessarily transferable. America definitely knows how to produce elite athletes. It even has an amazing women's football team. But the institutional system that has produced legendary American women has failed in the men's game. Many people are pointing to American elite youth soccer pay-to-play barrier, something that even I bumped into as a youngster, and I was nothing special. And I think this critique is right. How can you expect to compete against countries where football can be a ticket to a better life, where it has already become more than a sport, a multi-generational cultural obsession? Why put up more barriers to that? The US has the money, China has the capacity, India has the people, but none of them seem to have the passion. Football power does not emerge from possessing any of those individual things, it emerges from repeatedly shaping young people into top players. The average person has to really want it. And so in this way, perhaps the thesis is football is the anti-technocratic sport. At least that's my argument for part of its global appeal. I know it's a bit ironic given the governing body's bureaucratic characteristics. Stadiums can be built, stars can be bought, leagues can be subsidized. But the thing that makes a football nation live somewhere deeper, it lives embedded within the culture, and the community's passing the love for the game from one generation to the next. Is there a way to measure that zeal in a single metric? Maybe. But being a big country or a wealthy country clearly is not enough. It really does seem to come down to passion. The World Cup is not as much of a test of which country has the best athletes as much as it is a measure of which societies have had the ability to spend decades building the cultural infrastructure to produce the best 23-player rosters. That certainly isn't the same thing as equity. 84 countries have ever qualified, yet only 8 have ever won it. And all 4 of those left in the tournament this year are previous winners. Nonetheless, I'll be wearing my Harry Kane shirt Wednesday and hoping to sing Wonderwall at the end of 90 minutes. Thanks for listening to One Thing Worth a Rant by me, Jeremy, a show where I ramble on about some intersection of pop culture, media, and society. Talk soon.